Hello and welcome to this special briefing with the Jerusalem Press Club. I am Jonathan Beck, Director of Content. With us today is Hillel Neuer, Executive Director of UN Watch. We're here today ahead of the publication of a UN Watch report regarding the creation of the International Review Group, an ad hoc committee that was established to investigate UNRWA in the wake of allegations by Israel and UN Watch especially that UNRWA has ties to terror groups Hamas. Good morning, Hillel.
Good morning.
What can you tell us about the IRG, the International Review Group, that's publishing its report this Saturday on April 20th?
Well, it was created in early February, so basically 2 months ago, and it was given the mandate to assess whether UNRWA, the UN agency that deals with Palestinians, whether that agency is doing everything within its power, and I'm quoting, to ensure neutrality and to respond to allegations of serious breaches when they are made. So that's the mandate of the group, to look into how UNRWA ensures neutrality and responds to allegations. And they are scheduled to release their report on April 20th. And it's the review group is led by the former French foreign minister. She recently retired. Her name is Catherine Colonna, and 3 Scandinavian institutes, one, the Christian Michelsen Institute from Norway, the Raoul Wallenberg Institute from Sweden, and the Danish Institute from Human Rights. So that's the review group. These 3 organizations led by Catherine Colonna.
Okay, who selected those groups? What was the process of establishing this committee?
Well, it's a good question. We don't know formally. There was no sunlight put on the process, but we do know that although it was the Secretary General who on February 5th made the announcement, as he said, in consultation with UNRWA Commissioner General, in fact, it was the UNRWA chief himself, Philippe Lazzarini, who had announced a few weeks prior that he was setting up this review. So in news articles that appeared in Associated Press, and a video in Associated Press, and an interview with Australia's ABC Radio on January 17th, 18th, and 19th, a series of news reports and interviews, Lazzarini had announced about 3 weeks prior that he was setting up the review. He said, I will commission a review into these various issues, and I will try to appoint a third party that is reputable, either a professional consulting group, he said, or some independent entity. So clearly it was the Commissioner General of UNRWA himself who initiated the review and who formed it. So it seems that all the Secretary General did here was announce it and make it in his name, but it seems very clear from what UNRWA itself said that they were the ones who made the selections of the members, because they said they were going to choose the members. And so it seems that they crafted the whole thing themselves.
Okay, can you say why they did this, basically? Why did they call on this organization? I mean, I mentioned it in the beginning, but can you elaborate on that?
Well, we can look at what was said. Let me see if I give me just 1 second here. So Lazzarini himself said on January 17th that, and I'm quoting from the Associated Press, he requested an independent review of claims by pro-Israel groups of unchecked pro-Hamas activity in his organization. So claims by pro-Israel groups of unchecked pro-Hamas activity in his organization. And then he said that Lazzarini stated on the record, he said that these, at least some of these allegations, he said, were disingenuous, politically motivated, and constituted a smear campaign. So when he was on Australia's ABC Radio, he said that he met with the Australian foreign minister who had been visiting Jerusalem at the time, that he met with her and he told her that he's creating a review, and he told Australian radio that it was going to review allegations which are a smear campaign. So it's rather odd that the person creating an investigation into allegations, as I said, if someone in the United States said they're going to investigate serious allegations about grave breaches made against, pick your crime, Jeffrey Epstein for abusing underage girls, and you say, we're going to create an investigation, independent investigation to look into the smear campaign against Jeffrey Epstein. So, we've been submitting, and he's clearly referring to us, and there's another group, Impact SE, which looked into school books. But in terms of the organization, I'll just show you, I have it right with me, is a week before Lazzarini made his announcement, we revealed the content of this report. It wasn't the report itself, because that came a few days later, but UNRWA's Terragram. And we revealed on January 10th that there were 3,000 UNRWA teachers who belonged to a Telegram chat group that was dedicated, it was called UNRWA Teachers, and they were sharing information about curriculum, work schedules, training that they have to undertake, all kinds of various things that teachers might share on a chat group, professional information. But then from time to time, there would also be personal things being shared. And on October 7th, when Hamas was carrying out massacre, mutilation, rape, torture, abduction of over 200 Israelis and others into Gaza, this Telegram chat group of 3,000 UNRWA teachers, they were celebrating the massacre. They were sharing pictures and videos. They were saying, this is unbelievable. Who taught these jihadis? We need to deliver the same education ourselves. Someone answers, they were breastfed the jihad in their mother's milk. So this was all shared on Telegram. It's those who want to see it, it's on our website, unwatch.org, UNRWA's Terragram. And we began to expose this chat group a week prior. And it sparked a media firestorm. There were news reports around the world. And indeed, we were scheduled to appear in Congress on January 30th for a joint hearing on this and related aspects connected to how UNRWA is complicit with terrorism in a systemic and widespread way. And so I think there was enormous pressure. And indeed, a week later, again, what's important is that this is completely prior to the revelations that were approximately January 25th, where Israel had revealed to the UN that there were at least a dozen UNRWA officials who took part in the massacre, which sparked about more than 16 or 17 countries to freeze funding to UNRWA. So the impetus, as they said, on January 17th, was not the revelations by Israel that at least a dozen UNRWA workers were involved in the massacre, but you could say something less, but equally or sufficiently alarming, that thousands of UNRWA teachers were encouraging and promoting terrorism, which, by the way, in the UK, there's a group called Hizbat Tahrir, a terrorist group that was prescribed as a terrorist group on the basis that they were on the internet encouraging terrorism. Not that they had carried out terrorism in the UK, but that they were encouraging and promoting terrorism. So that's basically what we had revealed, that thousands of their teachers, and it wasn't new. This is something that for the past decade, for at least 9 years, since August of 2015, we had sent repeated warnings and reports to UNRWA that they had hundreds of teachers, and we estimated thousands, but we had only access to hundreds, on Facebook were inciting to commit terrorism, glorifying Adolf Hitler, and other forms of anti-Semitism. So to answer your question, Jonathan, the impetus, according to UNRWA itself, which they announced on January 17th, before the revelations by Israel, was our reports about their staff glorification, encouragement, promotion of terrorism.
Okay, so I understand that UN Watch says, argues that after your revelation, the committee they established to investigate this is flawed and tainted to begin with. Why the rush now? I mean, after regardless of what was the impetus, countries stopped funding. So now UNRWA is kind of defunded. I think there's a few countries that are still funding it, but the general tone is that UNRWA itself is tainted, and European countries, the West, are not funding it. Why the rush to publish this report about the International Review Group?
Well, no, that's your assessment is needs to be corrected. Indeed, in the end of January, there was a cascade of countries announcing suspensions of funding. You could say most of the major. By the way, the donors to UNRWA up until recently are all Western countries, and that's deliberate. The Palestinians want the Western countries to legitimize this. It's not about giving money for aid. The whole point of UNRWA is the political point that Palestinians have a so-called right of return, that millions of Palestinians who were brought up on ideas of destroying Israel, they have a right to enter sovereign Israel, which has no basis in international law whatsoever. The whole point of getting Western countries, and they say it, they don't want to Arabize the donor groups. They want it to be Western countries, so they will legitimize the narrative of UNRWA. So these Western countries, the vast majority of them suspended funding, including the United States, Germany, France, the UK, basically announced that they're not going to fund them. They announced a suspension. I would say most of the countries, or at least half the countries, have reinstated funding. So Japan, France, the EU, Canada, Australia, Sweden, and a couple of others announced that they reinstated. Those who have not reinstated funding, the United States, which has passed legislation saying it's now a law. President Biden signed it into law, basically bipartisan. He signed into legislation that the United States will not fund UNRWA for the next year. It'll be the next administration, whoever that is, that will have to decide. But until March 2025, in American law, there is no funding for UNRWA anymore. And the other countries that have not funded are Switzerland. I'll be testifying in their Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee in 2 weeks about this. Switzerland is not, the UK is not. Germany reinstated funding for UNRWA other than Gaza. But UNRWA Gaza, they still have to decide. And the Netherlands and a few other countries have not decided. So maybe it's about half today. And it's clear. So the question, why did they create this review group? So initially, as I indicated, there was the pressure of our report. I should also mention, very important, January 15th, 2 days before Lazzarini made the announcement, he received a letter from the US Congress, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and others, demanding that Lazzarini appear before the Congress and answer questions about his staff ties with terrorism. And he chose not to appear, and it seems that the review group was meant to be sort of to show that they're doing something. So it seems that the purpose of the review group is to show various stakeholders that UNRWA is doing something about the allegations. But at the same time, we know that it's designed for countries to climb down from the suspension and to reinstate funding. And indeed, we have the quotes themselves. Chris Gunnis, who was spokesman for 12 years and left a few years ago, but just came back to UNRWA in a surrogate capacity, in an unofficial capacity. He's been aggressive as a spokesman for UNRWA on social media, on Twitter, as well as on Al Jazeera and other platforms. He said that, and I'm going to give you the exact quote, that's in our report. He told Pass Blue, which is a website that advocates for the UN, he said, quote, "I hope the external report by former French minister, soon to be available, will provide the donors with further cover," I'm quoting, "provide the donors with further cover if that's what they need within their own internal constituencies to resume funding for UNRWA." So Chris Gunnis, who there's no one more plugged into what UNRWA is thinking and doing, he said expressly that the whole point is to give donors cover for their internal constituencies who are going to say, what are you doing? The whole report is to provide cover. So in other words, the report is not an impartial investigation into how anywhere from 500 to 2,000 UNRWA officials belong to Hamas or Islamic Jihad in Gaza, not into the fact that our group, for example, has been sending for 10 years warnings to UNRWA that they have thousands of staff, we estimated thousands, who incite terrorism, and their response by Chris Gunnis was to attack us. Not that UNRWA is going to impartially investigate why 3,000 teachers were part of a chat group that celebrated the atrocities. So none of those things, but rather it's to provide cover for donors to resume funding for UNRWA to satisfy their, quote, internal constituencies. So he said it himself. And indeed, I quoted before Lazzarini, who said, even as he announced on January 17th, and 2 days afterwards in various interviews given, even as he announced to AP and Australia's ABC Radio that he's going to commission an independent review into allegations about neutrality breaches. That's a euphemism at the UN. As he said, allegations that they have ties with Hamas. Let's not use the euphemism. Even then, he said that these allegations they're disingenuous, they're politically motivated, and they are a smear campaign. So right from the beginning, we know that UNRWA, which created the review, never treated this as a serious investigation into widespread promotion of terrorism, complicity with terrorism. The head of the union for years in Gaza was Su'ail al-Hindi, the head of the UNRWA staff union. He's a member of the Hamas Politburo with Yahya Sinwar. He was elected publicly in 2017 to the Hamas Politburo. He's one of the leaders of Hamas. And eventually he was embarrassed UNRWA was embarrassed by the public revelations, so they let him go. They actually asked him to resign so he can still collect his UNRWA pension today. And when he was suspended the first time in 2011, 8,000 UNRWA teachers in Gaza went on strike at Hamas's initiative to rally in his support. They went on strike for 3 months. The UNRWA teachers shut down 243 schools, abandoned 220,000 students, and there were 8,000 teachers rallying for the Hamas Politburo member, Su'ail al-Hindi, to remain the Gaza staff union leader. So to say that it's just a few bad apples, which has been the talking point of UNRWA's apologists, is absurd. 8,000 UNRWA teachers went on strike for 3 months to support the Hamas Politburo member for his right to be the UNRWA staff union, even though he works for Hamas. So all of this is treated as a smear campaign, which is very sad. The UNRWA is not taking it seriously. So that is the origin of this review, and that's why we think it's very important to ask the question: who are the members of the review group, and what do we expect to see on Saturday?
Okay, thank you, Hillel, for this. As we mentioned, your report will be on the written materials section of the Jerusalem Press Club website. And also this briefing will be sent to our members. Thank you very much for your time. Good morning.
Thank you.